Hey everyone, this is Rocky from WeLearnChess.com, and got another cool video here for you today. Only made a couple videos in the past couple weeks just because I had a pretty high workload for my job, and also I've been making some improvements to the site, which I'll show in another video soon. And I've got a new tool that's coming out, and it's actually finished development now, so I'm just developing content to put with it. That'll be pretty cool. Updates coming soon. But in this video, we're going to look at another line in this Danish Gambit that I promised to look at. And I just got a game in it, and so it kind of made me curious to look at some of the lines. And so let's just jump into it here. So e4, e5, and then we get this Danish Gambit, and then, yeah, this is Lee Chess, by the way. So, yeah, this is pretty, their computer analysis is pretty nice. I think I knocked it before. Like last year, I don't think maybe they didn't even have it. At some point they put it up, I didn't really like it that much, but now I do. They have Stockfish preloaded on here, and before I don't know if they showed the variations, but now they're showing the variations. Or maybe I just didn't realize it. So yeah, and they also have like some graphs here about opening, middle game. Also have got your inaccuracies, mistakes. So they've done a really nice job here with this analysis. Got to give them credit. But okay, as I covered in my first video in this Danish Gambit series, obviously you can play d5 and pretty much equalize. So this is why it's the most played move, because if you can equalize basically for free out of the opening, then there's, I don't know, you should usually take that as black. And if you play d5, you're not going to go into a lot of the really sharp lines that we're going to look at. So probably at some point, you know, maybe I'll switch back to just playing that because it's a lot easier to play. Having said that, if you want to have a little more fun and to really try to punish White for, for his play, then also I think it's also a good exercise in defending actively, and it's really good for your tactics, practicing your tactics, because all these lines are super sharp if you want to take this pawn, I mean. So, yeah, the computer likes taking with the knight. I do too. Like if I were White, I would want to take this pawn now. And for the cost of a pawn, you're getting really nice development. You're going to get some nice open diagonals for your pieces. Great development lead. But the reason that I think a lot of White players don't play this is because they're trying to get what you see in this game continuation, where they get these beautiful bishops. So we've looked at this in previous videos, but just okay, let's draw some good arrows here. But obviously, just really nice bishops on the adjacent diagonals. So we've seen that theme before. This is what a lot of players are going for, so this is usually what you'll see. And here, the computer had briefly looked at queen e7. I don't really like that so much. I think one of the ideas with queen e7 is that you're protecting the f7 square, because we'll see a lot of lines where White can play bishop takes f7. But that bottles up your dark square bishop, and I don't really like that so much. So yeah, and the computer eventually switches over here to the bishop check, which is what I've gone over in previous videos, and I like this because you're getting closer to castling faster. Okay, now in my earlier video we looked at knight c3, and in one of my games, and I promised that we would look at knight d2 later after I've had a chance to look at it, and try to look at some of the differences. So one of the differences with the knight on c3 is that sometimes there are some tactics on this square. I'm not going to repeat all those lines because this video is probably already going to be long, so I recommend that you look at the previous videos in the series to see what I'm talking about with that tactic there. Okay, so let's take a look at the knight on d2, which was played in the game. And my question to myself here was, okay, what's the difference between the knight on d2 and the knight on c3? Well, there's a few differences, and it was really hard to figure them out. I mean, one of them was the tactic that I've shown in previous videos, the knight on c3. But what about when the knight's on d2? Like, what is that doing, and what is that allowing for black, and what's it doing for White? So one of the things we'll see is that sometimes in some of the lines black gets a pawn all the way up to c3 and forks, either just directly winning a piece, or assuming that White doesn't blunder the piece, just sort of simplifying, getting rid of one of these dangerous bishops. And another theme, and I'll show some lines with that, and another theme that we'll see here, also leading to simplification, is with the line that could have been played in the game, it wasn't. So here at knight f6, this is the idea of black, getting this bishop out with check, and then quickly developing and trying to castle. Like, just hurry up, get this king out of the center. And even when you get castled, of course, you're not totally safe because of these bishops, and the queen can come out to the king side, and still pretty scary. But, of course, it's better than having your king on the open e-file. So, okay. So what I fully expected my opponent to play here was e5. I mean, probably like 90-95% of the games, you see that, like bumping the knight, trying to misplace black's pieces and put them on undefended squares and perhaps take advantage of that. And my opponent didn't play that, so we'll look at that variation, those lines later. But let's take a look here, because this immediately points out one of the differences between the knight on d2 and the knight on c3. With the knight on d2, you have this move, knight e4, which is really interesting. I mean, you can still play knight e4, but the problem is, in the other lines we'll see. So in either of these lines, a lot of times you're going to see white take this pawn and try to get one of these pieces back. So winning a pawn back, displacing the black king, and continuing with the attack. So if, for example, you were to take this, then it's going to be a bit of a problem. Get queen b3, some lines. Oh, that's one other difference too. With the knight on d2, the queen obviously can't come here to d5 and check this way. So it has to check on b3. So that actually can make a difference depending on which piece white was trying to win back and, you know, which squares he's checking on. But okay, here, I mean, I still don't like, the line given by the computer is this. The point of sacking this pawn is here so that you can retreat this knight back afterwards, because you're going to block here with tempo. So basically the queen has to take this, then you come back like this. But this line I don't really like, because now with this battery coming down on g2, I mean, you can't move the pawn, obviously. And yeah, if you have to play like, I mean, queen f6 is a little bit scary, because maybe he can move the queen. Actually, couldn't he just check here? Or block with, I guess, the queen. You're starting to give up material back here, and yeah, I don't think I really like that. And I don't really like queen f8, because now your rook's trapped in there. And this is just, like, yeah, I mean, would you want to play like that? I mean, that's pretty rough. So for those reasons, you actually don't want to take this bishop. You want to play king f8, and a lot of times you want to play king f8, because the thing is, you're going to be threatening this bishop at some point. You're usually threatening this bishop once you've protected your loose pieces, so that a queen check that comes out, for example, to b3, or a queen move somewhere, especially like a queen move like to f3, like your pieces aren't actually getting hit, because, you know, they're protected. So like, for example, a queen on e7 would protect your bishop. Right now we've got a couple loose pieces, so we've got to make a couple moves before we can get to that situation where we don't have loose pieces. Once we don't have loose pieces, then we really are threatening to take this bishop. And an important point here is queen f3 actually doesn't work. You can take with either piece, but if you take with the bishop, you've got this nice move here, which is just forking, so that any bishop discovery, you could just take the queen. So queen here, which isn't really, it's not geared towards protecting that. He's gonna take this bishop back, but still, whatever. This position here, okay, the black king is displaced, but so is the white king, and you're just up a piece, and you're also up a pawn. I mean, probably the only idea that white has left here is going to be some kind of e6 push, but I mean, it wouldn't even work here because the knight's defending the queen. But yeah, it's too little. Black's just going to win this pretty easily, I think. So I think we can put that to bed and come back to this position here. Okay, so now white has to do something. I mean, this knight is getting hit twice by minor pieces, and only the queen and the king are defending it. So obviously the queen doesn't want to take back. So yeah, here something has to be done. Now, it should be noted that because this knight's on d2, white doesn't really have this retreat attacking the knight, because we can just take this. And right here, exactly in this position, black is protecting the f3 square with this knight, and this is a huge difference. Okay, so if the knight was on c3, we wouldn't have this. So let's quickly look. Okay, so here, knight f6, e5, and if we play the knight here, bishop takes. Okay, here the computer just wants to take it, but let's say we play king f8. Now, bishop back, and we don't have the move that we had before. If we try to take this here, queen check, and now we're getting destroyed. Like, what? I mean, if you want to try to play here, you're getting mated. You know, you're going to block here. This is the computer's best move and just give up the queen. Obviously, that's terrible. Also, you're losing these pieces. So this is a huge difference in these lines, is that this bishop can come back, hit this knight, and then you would basically have to move this so you're temporarily protecting the square. I almost wonder if white could even just push this knight and you would just have to give it up. Yeah, you would just have to give it up, basically. I mean, moving it back. I was thinking queen f3 actually here, no good. Still pretty good. There's a lot of good moves here for white. You're getting attacked, like just viciously attacked here. So, so I guess the computer just wants to get rid of one of the attackers. But now, with the knight on c3, this file is open here. So, well, actually, either check is probably good. But you could see, for example, this check, keeping the king from running away to maybe a potentially better hiding square, taking this piece, hitting this piece. The attack is continuing. So important to remember, if the knight's on c3, you don't have this resource, which you would have before. Now, let's go back to the other line and see what that resource actually gets us as black. It still probably isn't that great, to be honest, but it's the recommended line here. So, okay, knight e2, knight f6, e5, and now we do have this resource because we saw, just quickly to remind us, that we're protecting this square. Okay, so that means that, that the bishop shouldn't drop back here, really, because it's not really doing anything. The computer gives this funny line, and I don't think most humans would play this. I mean, of course, you know, this is, okay, it's unpinning, and it's, you know, still there, you know, black can't just take this because of the loose bishop. But yeah, I don't really see much benefit here. I mean, okay, black, you can play this check and displace the king. The knight could go back, I guess, but probably king f1. I think I have seen that in a couple games, and people who play this opening probably aren't too averse to putting their king on f1 because it's recommended in a lot of lines, and they've probably analyzed their own games. But we could quickly look at like something like this, like just blocking. So yeah, here just taking, and now the problem is obviously that, you know, any checks that come, they're going to be annoying, but you don't have any loose pieces over here. So actually king f1 actually is pretty much forced, I guess. And okay, the computer wants to just take this now and give the piece back. And we could get something like this. Taking the pawn immediately, I'm not sure if I like. Probably I would develop the knight. It's okay. And then, yeah, maybe ideas of fianchettoing this bishop, maybe bringing it out to a6 or putting it here. So still a little bit complicated here for black to play. But both of the kings are displaced, right? So we have to get our h8 rook into play, but also white has to get their h1 rook into play. It might be a little bit easier for white because probably he could play something like g3, king g2, and then slide the rook out anywhere here. Whereas we've already lost one kingside pawn, so it's a little bit harder for us to push another one. Both sides could also think about ideas of like maybe playing the h-pawn and lifting the rook or something like that, but you got to be careful. So anyway, this is a complicated position, but you know, probably black should be able to be slightly better in a lot of these lines. His development is still a little behind too, though, so it's definitely not easy. I mean, this looks like a fighting game. So I think, you know, to be fair, it's probably a fighting game for both sides. So yeah, here, I mean, I don't know if there's something better. I was thinking like queen e7 because now you're protecting this bishop and you are just threatening to take this bishop with your king, so we'd have to retreat. Yeah, even playing c6 is interesting, but maybe just developing. I'm just trying to make some logical moves. I'm avoiding taking this pawn just because black's development is a little bit shaky, but at some point, actually, it probably makes sense. Because the thing is, if you win this pawn, well, first of all, if you get trades, then it's, well, now you're kind of really playing with fire, I guess. The king actually can get safe, although it's a little bit sketchy. But the point is that when you win this e-pawn, you're going to be able to potentially play d6 at some point, which Blocks off one of the weak diagonals towards your king and also allows you to get your bishop out. So it's probably less about winning the material than it is to just try to untangle your pieces. But yeah, I think I like queen e7 a little bit better, actually. The computer now actually likes this better too. So that's kind of funny. It changed its mind. All right, so I taught Stockfish something. Is that what that means? Or I just didn't wait for it to calculate long enough. Okay, so anyway, yeah, I think that we've seen sort of the reason behind those lines. I still don't actually think that most players would play this, because they really want to keep their bishops. Like, that's the point of the opening, is to keep their bishops. But the problem is, like, okay, if you want to keep this bishop, remember this is getting hit, so what else can you play? Probably only knight f3, because, you know, you need a piece to defend that. What else can you defend it with? And the computer wants to simplify here. This does lead to a little bit of a tricky position. Yeah, what's interesting here is, okay, if you take this, and he takes it with the queen, and you take here, you are up a piece, but you have 0 development, and your king is misplaced. And the problem is, after castling, yeah, I was thinking I would want to play the rook here, but the problem, I think, with this is that you're getting stuck here, and then something like this, where you can't go. So probably something like this. This is terrible. Blocking the diagonal. Oof. Yeah, this is just, this is really rough here. Wow. Yeah, and I mean, even with just the 2 pieces, you're still in trouble here. I mean, I'm going a little too far here, but even black would survive that, I guess, but it looks terrible. But yeah, so I guess that's the reason for putting the rook not on the e-file. So you're leaving this square for the king, I think, is the idea. Putting the rook on f8 also seems logical, but isn't the bishop going to come here to a3 is my question. Like, okay, so we have this square for the king now, yeah, and here it comes, just hitting. Okay, but the computer's arguing that you have this move. This still looks really, really tough to deal with. Really, really tough. And just always potentially these pushes coming, and now it would come with a tempo on the rook too, which looks even worse. Yeah, so the rook over here just putting pressure on this file. Computer just wants to get out and yeah, try to untangle this. This is tough. Is there anything else here for black? I mean, I imagine that king e8 right away is something. I would probably want to develop. Yeah, why am I getting better evaluations for moves that I'm making as opposed to what the computer recommended? Maybe it'll go down after a little bit. So what is the difference here now? Now we're hitting this pawn, but still, you can't really take that, right? Because of the rooks. Yeah, all these quiet moves that you would have to kind of find. I guess the idea maybe might be to blockade here. Yeah, it is, okay. Yeah, if you can get to that, okay, so that's an important theme to remember, I think, in this line, because this line is entirely possible. So if we go back here, I think that very few players will actually play this move, because they want to keep their bishop, so I think a lot of players will play this. I don't know if there's something else here for black. Let's see. Considering that I found some other good moves, let's play around here. Queen e7. Yeah, then the bishop comes back, and yeah, so probably you have to go for this simplification line. So this is entirely possible. I wonder if here we have something else. Yeah, bishop comes back again. Okay, so this could very well happen, right? And if this happens, then, unless there's some refutation for whatever reason, I'm finding a better move than is originally getting recommended. On the Lichess backend, they say that they weaken the Stockfish engine intentionally so that people are going to have more fun playing against it. But I wonder if they only weaken the engine for when it's actually playing the games and not for the analysis. Okay, no, it went down here again. Okay, because of this check. So the king's going to come to e8 in these lines. And unfortunately, you're going to have to find a way to deal with this if you want to play against knight d2. And you wouldn't really have a way of predicting which square your opponent's going to put his knight on, like c3 or d2. So you have to be willing to go into this line if you're going to take the pawns. The knight is doing a nice job here blockading and potentially maybe coming out with tempo. This looks pretty bad still, though. Okay, you get a tempo here. Wow, yeah, I don't think anybody would play knight f8 here. So what is the point here? Yeah, e6 is coming fast. So this is pretty tricky. I think that to avoid making this too long is that you would want to play around with these positions for a while and sort of see how you're going to untangle. And if that means going into something like this, where you end up playing this retreat, yeah, I would want to do something else. So giving an exchange, actually. But here we see a similar idea. So we're seeing a theme here where if you can't remember all the moves, we want to look at patterns. And blockading on e6 is a pattern that we've seen. Now the problem is if you blockade, you could face f-pawn pushes, but maybe you'll have a way to protect the knight. And this diagonal would be blunted, so your rook is protected. Or shielded, I should say. So yeah, whether it's the queen or the knight, getting a piece here to e6 is one strategy for black in these lines. So if you get into a situation where you've played this line, you simplify, and you take this bishop, then yeah, probably you will see castles. Then here, one of your strategies is going to be to get a piece here. So yeah, here, okay, the computer wouldn't want to check here, so I guess that's the argument for this. King e8, as we've seen here, and this is where we saw this line. Whoops, sorry. This is where we saw this line, where we get this funny queen maneuver. I think probably you'd see something like this, but yeah, okay, you can, all right. So playing g3 would actually free up this rook, but again, we're looking at potentially ideas of coming down and blockading here. So yeah, this rook is free now. That was the idea with that. A quiet move with the king. Yeah, actually you do have to make it, because if you try to do this now, you're getting hit with e6, right? And it's coming with tempo here, but still, you're getting this with check. And yeah, here you've got to give up the queen back like that, and you're still down development here, so I don't really like that. So yeah, you'd be forced to play this kind of move, which is pretty nasty. The queen is protecting your rook, by the way. Yeah, here I'm not quite sure what white should go for. Like, let's just say he tried to triple up, then that would give you time, actually. So here, this isn't with check, so now you would actually be able to you wouldn't be able to take that pawn, right? So, okay, hitting this bishop. Okay, so I'm going too far again, but yeah, I mean, those aren't really great moves for white, but okay. But the whole point there is that trying to blockade on e6 and also paying attention to whether you're getting checked on, on an e6 move. So that's the point of this king move. Yeah, you're gonna have to play around with those positions, but I think that it was important to look at those lines to see what you could end up with. Because with knight e2, you could end up with some of these lines really easily. Okay, so having done all that, we've seen one of the key reasons here. Now, is there anything else that white could do? Probably not, so let's not look at that anymore. Okay, so in the game, my opponent played kind of an interesting move. Played f3. So I think his idea behind this was that he didn't want to block off this diagonal. For example, if this knight ever tries to move right now, then this g7 pawn is getting hit and the rook is getting hit. So yeah, I think he just wanted to keep that open and just also not let the knight in. And, either he'll develop his knight here to e2 and castle, or maybe he'll castle by hand. This diagonal is open for black though now. So that's kind of interesting. That's a drawback too. And I think that it's important to show this position because you could see this. I mean, I think most of the time you'll see e5 in a lot of positions. But here it's interesting to look because I didn't find the move in the game, and there's another theme or pattern that I want to look at. Actually, two patterns that I want to look at here. So here the computer wants to play d5 immediately. And the idea is that regardless of whether white retreats or takes this, probably he won't take the bishop, because then you're just, well, you could probably even take that pawn, but just castling and take the pawn later. He doesn't want to give up one of his bishops for your knight, so he's going to take with the pawn here, or retreat. And this gives you an important moment where you can castle. So your queen's still protecting this knight, so, of course it could get taken, but you'd take it back. So what I mean is your kingside structure is not getting destroyed. And, maybe something like, this pawn is always going to be weak. Probably he can't defend it. So he might just try to go for development. And, you could take it, I guess. Taking it's helpful because you'd be able to develop your knight out. So takes here. And here, I think, the pattern that I wanted to look at was that you're blocking the diagonal and it let you castle, because you're able to do that in some situations. So if you get into positions where you see that that's an opportunity, even if you have to give a pawn back to do it, getting your king safe is important. Plus, a lot of times you give that pawn temporarily, but you get it back, and then you sort of restore your material advantage that you had. And here, I looked at some of these lines before. It's kind of funny, but white actually has to simplify. He's forced to simplify and get rid of both of his bishops and his queen even in this line. And let's take a look at why. For example, if you were to just castle, then you get forked. And even something like this, you can take this first. These are like desperado tries. You're still hitting this. You can actually play the knight out here, because now you're looking at something like that. But if takes, you could take that first. You're still hitting the rook. If he tries to save the rook, I don't know. So maybe looking at this here. You can take this. You're hitting this. Whoops. And let's say the rook didn't go here. Let's say the rook went out here. I don't know. Something like that. You've got knight a5 ideas. The computer wants to even come out here. And look at all these pieces now getting towards white's king. It's white that's getting attacked. So there's tons of tactics in those lines that, of course, you would have to look at. But basically that means they can't castle here. And if he can't castle, and he can't even castle by hands, because this knight is just loose. I don't really know what else. He doesn't want to do this, right? Oh, now you're getting a check in, too. And this knight is pinned. Yeah, this bishop is actually loose. That's another important thing to look at. But yeah, he wouldn't want to underdevelop his bishop anyway. And something like rook over here is just too slow. Like, let's say we go here. Something like this. Now we've got 3 pieces on here. That's terrible. And we're simplifying. So he has to take this. And if he's got to take this, he just had to give up one of his bishops. And now he still can't castle, because we're just going to take this. So if he wants to, what is he going to do here? This knight's pinned, and this other knight can't really protect it, because it's exactly next to it horizontally. So horizontally or vertically next to it, obviously it can't protect it. If it was diagonally next to it, it could make one move and protect the other knight. Something like this, trying to kick the bishop, you can just stay on the diagonal. You could do this, but even takes, and this is sitting the queen, but you've got checks with the rook, you've got checks with the queen, and, I don't see what white has gained out of this other than just getting a losing position. Both of the bishops are gone now. Actually, black has a bishop. So even, computer likes the queen check, but let's say even rook check, and you just simplified again. And now the queen's not even on the board. Even if the queens were on the board, it would favor black, because his king is safe. The only thing that the white has is a lead in development here. Maybe he can find a way to win one of these pawns with, like, the knights, but it's gonna be tricky. It's black's move here, so he could kick a knight, or maybe he could just play c6 to keep the knight out of these squares, which would hit c7 and potentially, bother these rooks. But I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on that, because black can probably sit there and find ways to win that. And if white has to get rid of both of his bishops and the queen, then I'll take that line all day long. So, and I don't know what else he can do here. The knight's getting hit twice, so, again, something like this. Now we're pitting the other knight. Okay, you can castle here, but now you're okay. If the computer wants to come right in here and hitting this knight twice, and let's say if he does something like this, we're hitting this rook. By the way, this rook is another common pattern that you want to look at. Now, you'll never really see anybody underdevelop their bishop to f1. I don't think I've ever seen that. I mean, I should say you never see it, but I mean, you have to remember that White went to a lot of trouble to get this dark square bishop on this long diagonal, so he really doesn't want to trade this bishop, and he really doesn't want to underdevelop it to f1. But I don't know what else White can really try here. Like some plan like this, with the like maybe bringing the rook over so that he's got two pieces here, would allow him to castle. But okay, well actually, yeah, it's just totally refuted actually by bishop f5 hitting the square. But even if he could put the rook there, you're giving Black 2 or 3 tempi to get his pieces out, and that's one of the only trumps that that White had in this opening to begin with. One was the really nice bishop pair, which is already gone, and the other one is the lead in development, which would also be gone in that case. So he's basically forced to trade this, yeah, and then, well, the computer wants to even keep it. But I think, the computer keeps going back. I mean, we looked at moves like this and this, but the thing is you have so many choices here as Black. But I kind of like the line here of just trading, like playing this knight over is a little bit playing with fire here, actually, because you're just going to lose that piece. So you would have to play this, yeah, and then you're simplifying. So, yeah, that means that all the way back here, that if you do get this position, then you should actually play d5. And here, okay, he can play e5, but it's actually too late now. So we're going to see this other pattern that I wanted to look at here. And the thing is, you're actually forking him. So, okay, whatever. And, yeah, now I don't think there's really much that... Yeah, if anything, you could take this, actually. But I like keeping this knight pinned. You're going to win this anyway. Check, so what? You've got this here. Maybe trying to threaten this, but yeah, you can take this with check. He's got to take this, takes, and yeah, take your pick. You want to, just develop and protect this pawn and take this pawn next. You want to take it first. Doesn't matter, you're totally winning. So one of the other patterns to look for there was actually this fork. And that, of course, is not possible if the knight's on c3. So this, I think, is a lot less likely to come up. Your opponent would really have to blunder. But in my game that I posted, I think it was a couple months ago now, this actually came up, and I didn't see it. I had a fork, and I didn't see it. So I think maybe almost this exact line, I think, might have come up without probably f3. I don't remember how we came about it. So the point is that once f3 is played, yeah, d5 is just a good move. And you don't have to play the meek d6, which is what I played in the game. And here, obviously, if he took again, we would transpose into that line that we take a look at where you have time to castle, you're getting this pawn back, and White has to simplify. So, yeah, it's possible that you'll see f3, so I think it was worth looking at that. But, yeah, we did see some important patterns there, I think, and those probably are the most important ideas that I wanted to cover in the video, but we can quickly take a look at the rest of the game. So I played this sort of weak d6 move. The reason that it's weak is because, one, because I had a more forcing continuation where I was hitting the bishop, right? One line I didn't look at was the check, actually, but you can do this. So, and here it's the difference there is that your knight's not hit yet. Like here and here, his bishop's getting hit, but your knight is not getting hit. Whereas in some other lines that I looked at in my very first video, the pawn's already on e5 and hitting this knight because your opponent hasn't played f3. He hasn't used that tempo. Instead, he's used the tempo here. So you can look back at those videos and see how those continuations shape up. They're pretty crazy too. But okay, d6 is weak because I didn't take advantage of that forcing continuation. It's also weak because it allows this bishop takes f7 nonsense, basically. And here we always have to ask ourselves, are we taking this or not? Well, okay, let's see what happens if we play king f8, which a lot of times is the safer move. Bishop comes back, and that looks really uncomfortable. So here you do actually have to take this. You're allowing this, getting the piece back. But a nice difference here is that because this pawn is already moved, like when we looked at those variations earlier in the video, we didn't immediately have this bishop block. We had to play d5 and allow the knight to come back. That was the variations when the knight was on e4. But the difference is here, okay, takes and, well, we have a couple possibilities here. I was just going to say develop and let him take here. Let's see what happens if we do that. Yeah, I don't think this is such a big deal because you're going to get your other rook out. And, yeah, and also here's another pattern to look at. So because this bishop is always here, if he ever comes pawn grabbing on b7, you do have this idea. I would want to play this rook. This is an important tactical point. You have to play the a rook because if you do this, you can't. Well, obviously, you probably wouldn't want to do it here. But the thing is that you would have that rook on prey. So playing here, oops, obviously not that. And yeah, this queen is protected twice, so you can just take this. And this also temporarily stops castling as well. Okay, you get a pawn back. You can even do that. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, all this basically just means that, yeah, this is a great position for black, I think, because, okay, well, actually, you're the one who's down a pawn here, but you've got the activity, and white's got to find a way to get this rook into play. In the meantime, you're activating your king, and this pawn is pretty weak, too. I mean, probably you're going to find a way to win that. I mean, you've got ideas of just doing that immediately. Yeah, probably you would, okay, so you would play the king out first to protect this pawn. Yeah, and that's why you would want to play king here and not king to e6, because you want that square for your bishop, probably. So, yeah, trying to bother this rook, I would want to keep it, yeah. Here, and then maybe king here. So you're just doing everything you can to keep this pin alive here without you want to make sure you don't trap your rook. But, yeah, something where the king might actually have to waste time now coming back here, like move this pawn, bring the king over, and then you can try to, but he's going to use a lot of tempi for that. In the meantime, you're going to get your pieces out. Your pieces already are out. You're going to get your bishop back out and take this knight, probably win a pawn back. Then you're going to have an outside passer. And by the time all this finally white gets his pieces into play, it's probably too late. Your king's centralized. Yeah, this is really nice. I would definitely take black here. It's just a lot easier to play. And it's probably just, to be honest, probably winning if black plays it right. So maybe, yeah, I guess white is playing for the draw there, I guess is what I should say. It's probably not totally winning. But okay, that's if white goes pawn grabbing. I'm not sure if he would. But, yeah, the computer just wants to play this move here and develop this way. You do have this backwards pawn here, though. I'm not sure how I feel about that. But let's just say something like this, and okay, both sides have gotten their king safe. Yeah, and the game can continue from here. I don't really like having this backward pawn, but you know, I guess even if you lose that at some point, would you be even there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you would have even pawns there, and you could probably have a nice pawn chain on the queen side, like minus this pawn, obviously, because you'd probably lose it. But in the meantime, you could use it to help maybe make an outpost for your knight while you reroute it. Or maybe it'd be nice to get your knight up here, you know, up to d4 or something. I guess at some point it could get taken off. You got to be a little bit careful about this battery, but in the long term, he does have two knights that come potentially play around. But okay, yeah, I still think I like the knight move there. But you could kind of pick your, you know, not pick your poison. You could pick your preferred continuation here and see what you would do. This is, again, you know, certainly a potential, very possible variation that you could get in the F3 lines if you see them. But again, you'll see them probably a lot less. But okay, let's quickly take a look at the game continuation. So he was developing. And he didn't go for any of these bishop takes lines. But just remember that if your opponent does play that, you just want to carefully calculate. Take the time and calculate and see whether you should take that or play king f8, because sometimes it makes more sense to take and sometimes it makes more sense to play king f8 and threaten to take later. But you do have to look out for some of the patterns that we've seen where potentially the bishop can retreat in some lines, whereas in other lines it doesn't make sense. In other lines there's queen checks, where in certain lines there aren't. So you really have to be careful. You can lose the game on the spot, so you want to make sure you calculate those lines. it's worth taking the time there in the beginning, because if you can get out of the opening basically in this opening, you're going to be winning. So just try not to get destroyed right away. You should be okay. But okay, we get our game continuation here. I'm just developing, so I'm solving one of Black's problems, which is, being behind in development. And probably I could have played this move on the previous move too, but he forced me to play it, so whatever. And actually, yeah, that would have been nice, just getting a tempo on this bishop and rerouting the knight. Also potentially getting into this square, so this would have been nice. Probably he would do something like this, but then you're jumping in here. That's really annoying. And then he doesn't want to give up this bishop for the knight, so probably he would give it up, trade it this way, not give it up, trade it. Now you're getting the knight to c5, which is a beautiful square for the knight. It can never get hit by a pawn. It's probably going to be hard for him to loosen that up. He could at some point, but you can always bolster it with b6, which you might want to play anyway, just to potentially get your bishop out here. So this is really nice. And not too difficult to find, I think. Not seeing the whole continuation, but just seeing that you could get these tempi on the bishops here. Okay, so anyway, in the game, I get a little too eager to simplify a lot of times in these kinds of openings where I know that simplifying is to my advantage. And here I did create a weakness. I think I've done this before, actually, very similar. So he immediately starts to attack it, which makes sense. And the computer liked queen d7 there for some reason better, but I think it's probably a detail that we don't have to look at right now. Queen b3, and he's just piling up here. Yeah, I saw this move and I played it a little bit later, but yeah, here I actually made a mistake. But yeah, I could just defend this pawn. The knight on d8 looks terrible, but it's actually defending here and defending here. And you're going to move your king and potentially get a rook lift or whatever, and then once you untangle that, you can move that knight back. Probably you're not getting attacked here because with only one bishop, well, he does have the knights potentially coming in here. This knight also is potentially loose, though, so White's got some problems to solve, too. But here I actually did basically give the game back to him because he should have just taken here. And now the problem is with discovered checks, it's going to be a little bit annoying. Okay, well, this actually is important to note that doesn't work because the queen can block. But even if he takes here, and then he's got pieces on prey, and this rook's getting hit. So if he takes here, that's interesting. The computer wants to play here and not take this knight. I guess arguing that the knight's trapped anyway, so just take a moment out. But here, kamikaze, he gets at least a pawn and a little bit weaker king out of the deal. He's got the rook here, but when I get two pieces for the rook, I kind of like for one of them to be a bishop, because then you've got the bishop and the knight, and you've got one rook left, and they all kind of complement each other nicely. The two knights, yeah, I don't know. I don't really like that. The computer really liked White there, just flat out winning. So here, there must be some better move in the sequence there. But basically, I gave the game up there. But anyway, in the game, he didn't take, actually. Well, if he were to have taken my idea, it was this, that I was just protecting this. Something like this. It's important to know that the bishop is no longer sitting on this square, so a rook coming to the file isn't going to win a piece. But just trying to simplify here, I guess. Protecting this knight. Okay, I don't want to go too far. I don't like these weak pawns in these variations either. So this is just basically a mistake on my part, was trying to simplify too fast. But okay, he played one of the rooks over. Yeah, this rook, and that's not going to work. I don't remember if I played that in the game, actually. No, I defended this pawn. Okay, I played the weak move. But it works out, so I just want to get out of that pin's pawn and then basically free up my pieces a little bit. So I rerouted this knight. I did see the c5 square, which is pretty easy to see, but just getting a knight there. He gave up blundered the exchange there, so that made it a little bit easier. He still gets some pressure. But yeah, I think at some point I could have just resolved this issue of this weak pawn, but there was a lot of other stuff going on here. I just want to get my other knight to a good square. Here he is actually potentially doing something annoying here, because this pawn is pinned, so he could get this knight in here. I wouldn't be able to take it. And then he's got two knights looking at this square. It's kind of annoying. But even if he got that far and he played a knight check, it would take him longer because he's got to get the queen back on the light square diagonal. So he would have to like get a knight here, and then it actually doesn't work, because if he tries to put the queen on the light square diagonal, then I could always just take that knight. But the whole point is that, like, yeah, he's not really going to get any smothered mate, and he's not even going to win an exchange. Like, he'll get a rook back, but I'll get 2 knights, and I'm just up a piece, so none of that works. But I did kind of notice that that was a potentially weak square, which is good, because I usually miss diagonal pins. But okay, I just placed my knight on a good square, and it just felt like I was totally winning. The computer agrees. Here I just was hitting the loose knight and also potentially looking at some tactics here. I actually did see this tactic, but I didn't calculate far enough, so I made that quiescence or quiescence error that I mentioned in previous videos. I don't know who invented that term. Was it like Alex Linderman, or was it around before? I'm not really sure. I did see this, but the reason I didn't go for it was that I saw that he could block this check, and then I was like, well, still this looks pretty decent, but what I didn't see was that you immediately are going for a smothered mate, so he's got to give the queen back. And if that's the case, then of course you would want to go for that. It's just totally winning. So I just made that error of I stopped calculating here, and I didn't see if there was a way to do much else with that. So instead I kind of went for a slower way to sort of build up, and kind of gave up that opportunity. But again, it's all still winning. Here you got to be careful not to blunder back the exchange, although even if you do, you're still okay. And I actually offered to give back the exchange a couple moves later, just to try to alleviate any lingering pressure that white might have. So yeah, here I actually offered to give the exchange back, just because I felt like if he were to take it, takes, and then, okay, probably he won't trade, right? Because he wants to keep doing that. But anything, I mean, like something like this, okay, he's either got to play king g1, which is probably better, or play the rook over here, and then you get something like that at the very least, or yeah, king, queen here. This just looks terrible. And then you've got this nice resource just protecting everything. The knight's got this pawn, or even maybe something like this, let's see. Hitting this pawn. Yeah, you can just give it up, I guess, like trying to defend it. Well, maybe here. You could do that too, I guess. Like, the thing is, even not the best moves, you're still doing pretty well here. And remember, you've got these pawn rollers potentially coming. So even if you got a trade like this, oops. Even if you get a trade like this, I mean, you've got these 2 connected passers that are ready to just march. You also have another protected passer here, although this pawn's a little bit weak. But the knight's kind of holding it for a while. So yeah, all those variations. Again, I know I'm going too long, but I just wanted to show some of the things that could happen and some of the advantages so you can get as black long term. So that if you are able to simplify in this opening, a lot of times these queenside pawns, in some way, shape, or form, either the ones that are more towards the center or the connected ones here on the outside, especially if you can eliminate the a-pawn, are just beastly, because they're going to be so hard to stop. So that is a theme that comes up in this opening. But anyway, he didn't take it back. He went immediately in for the attack. He's kind of desperate now, I guess. Here, just moving the rook back, I guess. But then, if you did that, then you would have to kind of see the computer's idea to begin with, which here was actually a rook lift, which is kind of nice. So, yeah, and the point is, like, the rook would defend this weak pawn. It would also get rid of the a-pawn. And getting rid of the a-pawn is huge, because then you've got these connected passers, which long term are just going to win the game. So, yeah, okay, anyway, he didn't take this. And, yeah, here I just started making some threats of my own. And, yeah, now he's getting forked, and, you know, he's got some checks, and he can win a pawn and whatever, but it's not really, there's nothing going on here. Here he's just getting mated, but, I chose to win the queen just because it was easier. But yeah, there's mates if I stay on the second rank here, obviously. And then we can mate that way, or probably can mate on the second rank. But here I just chose to win the queen. But yeah, I guess all that's not important. But so if we go back to the beginning of the game, we did look at just a couple patterns with the knight on d2. So just as a recap, we looked at one of the resources where black's knight can come to e4, and it prevents one of white's ideas with potential pressure on f7, because eventually this knight will be able to take this knight and temporarily, just for one move, will defend against queen f3, and that will save black from pure destruction and actually leave him with a pretty good position. Some of those positions with simplifications that we've seen in this line that we really don't see in the knight c3 lines are still pretty difficult to play for black. His king ends up on e8 in some of those lines. You've got to probably take some time and play around. I've probably got to take some time and play around with those to see if I really want to play those positions, because they're entirely possible. But it is something else that happens with the knight on d2. We also looked at potential pawn forks on c3 in some lines. So those usually are lines where you end up playing d5 and hitting the bishop, and if we get like a trade like this, where he takes your knight and you take his bishop, or vice versa, then you potentially have forks here. And we saw that pattern as well. One pattern that I didn't look at, that I saw when I was analyzing before and somehow it didn't come up in the lines, is that sometimes you can end up as well with this rook being a little bit vulnerable for white. It doesn't look like it right now because this bishop's defending it, but sometimes if this bishop moves, like we saw some lines, it comes out here, or maybe lines where if you ever do see your opponent undevelop it, then of course that would weaken this rook or make it more vulnerable. But yeah, it's something to look out for, is the rook in the corner too, especially because you got pressure on this d2 square where, at some point the queen might take and leave this undefended. Again, it's defended for the moment, but just it's something to keep in mind. So yeah, your goals here, I think, with the knight d2 line as black, are probably to really know your opening stuff. I mean, you really have to know these lines. Not memorize them all, but again, remember those patterns and just kind of know how to get through the first, probably 10 moves or so that you're not getting destroyed, and then, be able to have some ideas of how to go forward, because you're going to have to untangle your pieces in some of these lines. This all assumes that white plays perfectly too. You got to remember that. So if white plays perfectly, you're still better, but it'll be a little bit tricky with your king. Chances are white's not going to play perfectly every game, so you probably get a lot of games where now you're really, really better. You might even blunder. And like in my opponent's position where he didn't even play the bishop takes f7 lines, which are the more forcing lines. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed that video. I know it's pretty complicated and can be a little overwhelming, so I don't want you to think I'm telling you okay, we got to memorize all these lines. But I think it was important to look at some of the patterns, especially the sacrifice lines, when you might want to take it, when you might not want to, some of the differences with the knight c2 and knight c3 placement, and that in combination with the previous few videos, I think will be pretty useful in playing this variation as black if you're interested in it. Of course, you can always look at that first video for some of the lines with the early knight d5, just to simplify. And also, I think I mentioned this in my first video, but if you don't want to take this pawn, which most people don't anyway, I think, and just playing d5 here, Chess Explained goes over some of the variations in playing this way, I believe, on his e5 repertoire that he made a few years ago, which is a great little series as well. So you'll want to take a look at that and kind of see which way you prefer to play. This is probably a lot easier, but you can have a lot of fun with taking the material, and then I think one of the more satisfying parts of playing with taking the pawns is that your opponent thinks he's going to get a huge attack, and a lot of times he just doesn't. So, a lot of times you just immediately dissolve everything, and wherever he puts the knight, then you're pretty much going to end up with a good game. The last thing I'll say in this video, which I know is extremely long, is that you do have this possibility of king f1, which is what the computer recommends, and it's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of lets white get on with things. This light square diagonal is actually pretty well protected by several pieces. And white's just going to keep developing, and you look at black's back rank here, it's not so great. So I'm not actually quite sure what what black would want to play in some of these lines. It looks pretty crazy. Yeah, here you're getting one of these lines here where the computer just doesn't even want to give that material. He just wants to give that material, but yeah, probably I shouldn't start going to that. So I guess I'll save king f1 for yet another video in this crazy series on the Danish Gambit Accepted with, I think it's called the Copenhagen Defense. And we'll leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you around.